Welcome to the St. Louis University Craft Talks, part of the St. Louis Literary Awards series of programming, with our host, Ted Iber, and special guest, Jeannette Batz Cooperman. The St. Louis Literary Award was created by the Library Associates of St. Louis University in 1967. To learn more about the Literary Award and the writers that we have honored over the years, check out the book The St. Louis Literary Award by St. Louis University Archivist Emeritus John Wade. We would also like to thank our sponsors for the Craft Talk series, Left Bank Books and Caldy's Coffee Roasting Company. Left Bank Books is one of the oldest and largest independently owned bookstores in the nation, offering a full line of new and used books, gifts, cards, magazines, toys, and services. You can order Jeannette Batz Cooperman books at a 20% discount if you let them know that you saw this interview. Caldy's Coffee Roasting Company is dedicated to creating a memorable coffee experience for their customers and guests, committing to sustainable business practices, providing educational opportunities, and supporting the communities in which they serve. And now, without further ado, Jeannette Batz Cooperman.
Welcome to St. Louis University's Craft Talks, part of the St. Louis University Literary Awards series of programs. My name is Ted Iber, and I'm the Executive Director for the St. Louis Literary Award. If you live in Missouri, Jeannette Batz Cooperman is one of the most recognizable names in journalism, a veritable institution in the field. Jeannette is a 2020 inductee in the St. Louis Media Hall of Fame and was named to the FOLIO 100 list of the best and brightest in the magazine industry nationwide. The award-winning Batz Cooperman was previously an editor and staff writer for St. Louis Magazine for 12 years. She also worked as an investigative reporter for the Riverfront Times, where she received recognition and numerous accolades from organizations like the National Black Journalists Association, the National Gay and Lesbian Journalism Association, the National Education Writers Association, and the Society of Environmental Journalists, to name just some. Jeannette was also a columnist for the Catholic Reporter, and her work has appeared in 17 magazines: O, the Oprah Winfrey Magazine, the Utne Reader, Glamour Magazine, the Boston Globe, and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. As if she hasn't been busy enough working as a journalist for several decades, Jeannette Batz Cooperman has written 5 nonfiction books and 1 murder mystery. Jeannette is now a staff writer for the amazing literary magazine, The Common Reader, at Washington University in St. Louis, truly one of the top literary magazines in the country. Lastly, I will add that Jeannette earned a Ph.D. in American Studies right here from St. Louis University, as well as a Bachelor of Arts degrees in philosophy and communication. OMG, Jeannette Batz Cooperman, you're like the most accomplished person ever. And welcome to Craft Talks, right here to your alma mater. I'm speaking to you live from Morrissey Hall. Of course, it won't be live to anybody watching this, but hi.
Hi, I think I should leave now before I screw that up, because that made me sound really good.
Well, it's a pretty amazing life resume, I have to say. So I've got some opening questions for you on writing process.
Okay.
Okay, so here we go. So your essays in The Common Reader range from cancel culture to period products to stargazing, the St. Louis Wheel, and most recently, a surviving grotto on the grounds of St. Mary's Hospital in St. Louis County. From where do you draw your inspiration for these topics and others?
Anywhere I can find it. People ask that a lot, and it's such a motley, miscellaneous list from everything I read, from people I talk to, from things that make me angry or curious or upset. The grotto came because a private eye that I had once profiled called me about it. He thought it was intriguing that no construction workers were willing to tear it down. I got a call from a woman once who wanted me to lift a curse, to find someone who would lift a curse, because I had written about pagans at one point. Things just come from all over the place. There's no single source.
Okay. I know that grotto well, by the way. I used to live right there.
Okay.
So it was a really cool piece to read from as well. All right. So during your time as a staff writer for St. Louis Magazine, you interviewed, and I quote, murderers, artists, polo players, brain surgeons, and heroin addicts. What has been your approach to conducting interviews and organizing your research for articles like these?
Well, I'm basically shy. So what I do first is I read. I read everything I can find. I hunt down old articles. I cull as much information. I'll listen to podcasts or watch videos. And then I start narrowing in, but I do it in circles. So I start with an outer ring. In other words, people that aren't going to call that person and say there's a reporter who wants to write about you. I just talk to people who might know of them professionally or live in the neighborhood or know somebody who knows them. And I slowly work my way in. If this is a tough, difficult, complicated profile and the subject might not be so willing, then I will talk to people up to a certain point. And when I hit that inner ring, I will first get the person's list of people they would like me to talk to, so that they're not hearing somebody's digging stuff up and it seems adversarial. I'm not adversarial. I just want to know as much as I can before I go in to talk to them initially. So, and then once I've gathered enough material, I come up with a long list of questions and I sort them and I try and find an order for them. And then I throw them away. I set them aside and I try not to look at them. And I let it be a conversation, because that's the way they will tell me things that I didn't even know to ask about.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it strikes me that building a relationship, even if it's short term, just for that moment, would be important. So
it's hugely important. Yeah. I remember I was interviewing somebody. He was a psychiatrist at SLU Med School, and he had been interned. He was Japanese American, and he had been interned during the war as a little boy with his family. And when we started the interview, he was seated on the absolute opposite side of a huge office. I had to shout. And it took little by little talking, listening, and gradually, physically, the space closed. And that was as good a metaphor as any.
That's great. So in an essay that you wrote for the Common Reader called "What Trends in Crime Fiction Tell Us About Ourselves," you write that people are always killing and getting killed, but the stories we tell about why and how and with what consequence tell a lot about us. Can you talk about what you learned about either yourself or about the writing process in general from writing your own mystery novel, for instance?
Well, the big thing I learned is something I'm still working on, and that is to leave some mystery, to create some suspense, to let things come through a little bit at a time so that there's a question in somebody's mind as they're reading. I grew up with the pyramid form of reporting. And so you were supposed to put everything everybody needed to know in the first paragraph with the clear expectation that they would then stop reading. So things just dwindled in interest as you went down the column. And I hated that instinctively, even as a young reporter. And we very quickly moved away from it. But, you get it stuck in your head that you're supposed to tell people stuff instead of withholding and making it much more interesting. So that was the struggle to write the mystery, and that is still my struggle, is to hold back.
Yeah, you really have to change gears if you're writing fiction or even creative nonfiction versus journalism, traditional journalistic writing. It's so different. Any writing habits or rituals that you participate in, like for either area of the genres that you work in?
One thing I've learned, I love school supplies, I love paper and pens. And I used to be really kind of precious about it. I would want to find the coolest paper and the coolest pen. In fact, I have this great pad that looks like an old library card, that I make my list of things to do. But I realized that when I'm really trying to scribble something down that's an idea, or try and write on paper a lead to something, because I've learned that doing it on paper makes you more thoughtful, it slows you down. And I realized that I need to write it on old scraps of paper, like loosely, and not make it so special that I'm trying to live up to my paper. I need to really jot things down on scribbly old junk. So it's kind of an anti-ritual. But if I'm really scared to write that day, if there's something that's really hard, then I listen to Bach, and I usually light some incense so the office smells good, and I make my dog sit at my feet, but he sits there anyway. So that's the extent of the ritual.
Well, next question completely relates to it. So particularly knowing that students are going to be watching this, I had to ask, what part of the writing process do you derive the most joy, and what part for you is the most painful?
There's two parts I absolutely love. One is the very beginning of the research, because it's exciting. Like, you don't know what you're going to find out. this is probably the mystery lover in me. It's always a big detective story. Where's the story? Where's the interesting bit? How much information can I get? What can I dig up? And that holds true even with essay forms. What can I think of? So I love that. I love that very fresh beginning. And I love the editing when it's all done and I can go back and just revise and scratch things out, because then the pressure's off. I've got something, maybe not physically in this electronic age, but I've got something captured. My homework is done. I can turn it in if I need to in a minute. So now it's just polishing, and I love that.
I am right there with you. Yeah.
And what I hate is the beginning to write. I've got the research, but I have to research and do way too much research until I get so bored with it because I'm finding out things all over again, the same things. And then finally it's like, okay, I need to write. And just that very beginning. That's why sometimes I sneak and I do it on paper, downstairs while my husband's watching TV, because that takes the pressure off too. I'm not sitting in front of this monitor with light glowing at me and nothing there yet.
You and I are 100% on the same page with that.
Really?
And I do mean that as a pun, by the way. I completely agree with everything you just said.
Okay.
All right, so some questions on writing style. Mm-hmm. So the investigative and narrative journal articles that you've written for the Riverfront Times and for St. Louis Magazine differ greatly from the essays that you've written recently for the Common Reader. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about the different ways in you approach those specific genres and what skills are needed for each? And what does your process look like for them?
Yeah, it's been a shift each time. Before I worked at the RFT, I worked at the university. I did St. Louis U's Alumni Magazine. So that was a very kind of safe place. And then all of a sudden, I'm at this alt news weekly that considers itself tough and edgy, which I'm not. And I'm supposed to be tough and edgy, So the point there was to dig up as much as you could, expose injustice, get people to say things, nail them on stuff, get them to sort of hang themselves by what they said. Often, not always. It was also to give a voice to people who were being not treated well. Mm-hmm. But it was all about quotes. It was all about facts and stats and quotes, and then spinning them into something that was readable and strong. So then narrative journalism starts to creep in. And when I went to St. Louis Magazine, I had the luxury of doing things with more polish. It was a monthly, not a weekly. I had more time to edit. I had more time to shape, and it could be more of a story. And suddenly quotes were sometimes in the way, sometimes clunky. And I needed to do a lot more in my own voice and save only the very best quotes. So It was a different kind of weaving. And suddenly I needed elements like scene setting and character development and elements of fiction that you use for creative nonfiction.
Right.
So that came into play. But I know back at the RFT, my mom used to say, God rest her, love her, honey, why do you just quote these other people? I want to hear you. And it was like, Mom, nobody wants to hear me. I have no expert opinion on any of this. The idea for a reporter is to get out of the way. Well, of course, now she's gone and she can't see, but now the burden at doing essays at the Common Reader is to have a voice. It is to kind of go out on the limb, whether it's I'm going to make a fool of myself or not, and do some thinking of my own, having done all the research. So it's very different, and the crafting of it should be a little more artful. It should be pleasant to read and not just adding to people's information. So whole new challenge.
I think I've been teaching creative nonfiction for roughly about 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I have to say that as I had been consistently reading your work, but it's not really until the last couple of weeks that I think I've gone through everything that you've written at the Common Reader. Mm-hmm. And I think you are such an amazing example of your work is such a great example of what good creative nonfiction writing looks like. I love how you weave your own unique voice into the articles along with the research that you've got. I think it makes such a difference. I can't wait to use your work when my classes come back around in creative nonfiction.
If you were here, I would hug you for that, because every day I'm like terrified to do this. So
You'd have to wear your mask if you're going to hug me.
yes, of course, and I'll hug you from 6 feet away.
Your spacesuit as well. All right, so I just mentioned voice. So can you talk a little bit about how voice and tone differ in your journalism work, and you can include your work in the common reader too, because I think it's pretty closely related to versus fiction.
Well, it's a huge difference. With the fiction, I was creating a world, and so everything was sort of a possible symbol or something that could be manipulated, something that could be bent toward the story. It was all about figuring it out inside my head. And one thing I was terrible about is plotting, because I would get too tangled up. You know, my imagination had been cut loose and I had way too much permission. So I was like, I would get my husband to tell me where I had gotten all tangled up, and he would listen, for a minute and be like, hey, it's too complicated. I just kind of went crazy because of all these years of discipline where you have got to adhere to reality. You are meant to be dealing in what is true, at least for one or two people, and you're not spinning a story. So it's just a very different tone. I think varies on the novel or the book. I don't know that there's a single fictional tone any more than there is really in journalism. It's all topic based, but it's such a shift in what your raw material is and what your imagination is supposed to do.
It's such a critical element of writing when we talk about voice and tone, and it's something that I relish teaching, because what I have found, and perhaps this is true for you, a lot of people have difficulty defining it when they're teaching it, or when students are trying to articulate what it is. So I think it's a really important element of any kind of writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, to be able to really understand it and to utilize it in your own writing.
Yeah, I'd actually like you to teach me someday. I will buy you whatever you want.
Or join my class.
Crash course, because yeah.
I am happy to do it. All right, so you include research in your essays for the Common Reader, citing studies about the way humans process the sensation of spicy food, the health benefits and dangers of red meat and red wine, and other interesting facts. So here's the question. Do essay ideas follow interesting research that you've read, or conversely, do you do the research once you've got an idea for an essay?
Both, absolutely. I will read some interesting study, bit of research, fact, stat, and I will get really intrigued and think around it and maybe have an idea for an essay. And then maybe I'll start the essay and I'll need more research because I'll have another idea that I need to understand better. Or I will just wonder about something in human experience and then go digging and try to find out what we know about it. Quite often you find out we don't know much yet. So those are the fun ones, but yeah, both.
One of the things that I love about your work in the Common Reader is that the essays are so diverse. They are so all over the map. If somebody was trying to pin you down, that says Jeannette Batz Cooperman is this type of writer, I would just point them to the Common Reader and say, yeah, not really, not so much. It's a huge compliment to you.
Well, I bore easily, so.
Well, it also, I think, says a lot about the magazine, that they give you the freedom to do that.
Oh,
I think it's
best job ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, to have that kind of freedom is such a luxury.
Yeah, I bet. So your website, which is delightful, it'll be posted on this website as well. You've got something called the Stray Thoughts listed, which are listed on the website, which I would refer to as whimsical and relatable. So in short sentences, you capture universal experiences about relationships, society, growing old gracefully, among other things. So I wanted to read a few lines so people can get an idea of what it is and then have you comment. So one, on developmental milestone, our internet connection flickered and died and my heart rate stayed steady. We spend most of our time interacting with who we think people ought to be and not who they are. And then a third one about retirement. You finally had the time to read, to see, to keep up with everything. And you no longer care about any of it. Do these lines come to you all at once, or do you sit down and just hash them out?
I'll tell you how that started. I did have a very long commute because I live in Waterloo. I was driving an hour each way.
It's in Illinois.
And
Okay.
so I would just think of stuff. And I was such a hazard scribbling things down that I got one of those, it's a little voice memo thing that is actually used by people who are sight impaired. So you just press a big button. And so I wasn't so much a hazard on the highway anymore. But I would just say stuff that intrigued me because I was trying to learn to discipline myself to write shorter. I was trying to develop that aphoristic ability because, Twitter was like, are you kidding me? 140 characters? Can't say my name in 140 characters. So I thought, I need to play this game. I need to make this kind of a writing exercise to see if I can get stuff really boiled down that I'm thinking about. So it was a big game.
So following up on that, how do writing these kinds of thoughts and aphorisms down help you process your own experiences?
Well, I think it keeps me sane. Every time I'm not even sure who I would be anymore if I couldn't write that stuff down, because if I don't write it down, it sticks and it goes over and over. And, it might be something that's a little bit cynical or glum or dreary, like I would watch people who were retiring and they had lost interest just when they had the time to do it. And I thought, and that would stick with me and make me sad. But as soon as I have it on paper, it's done, it's over. Then I just pay attention to the people who are having a wonderful retirement. It's a way to put things outside your brain to set them somewhere else. And it gives you a little more clarity, a little more perspective. They don't seem so gloomy or so cynical or so anything when they're down on the page. So I think it helps me a lot.
Yeah, Jeannette, I think you'll have another book out of this, is my prediction.
I don't know where that would go, but
all right, so moving on to more miscellaneous and personal questions.
Fun.
So you said that earlier you said you're naturally a shy person,
Mm-hmm.
but that hiding behind a notebook also makes all the difference, and that is a direct quote. What advice do you have for students who are shy but might also be interested in pursuing the field of journalism?
Not to hesitate, because initially I loved writing, I loved reading, and I thought, I could never be a reporter because that just seemed terrifying. But life kind of nudges you in certain directions, and I eased into it. And I remember once listening to a talk by Adrian Leblanc. She's an amazing creative nonfiction writer. And when she started out, she was just as shy, and she would be covering a trial, and she couldn't make herself go into the courtroom. So what she would do is she would wait outside while the trial is beginning, trying to work up her nerve, and she would talk to the bailiff, the sheriff's deputy who was hanging out in the corner, somebody who was smoking, somebody who was waiting to go in and give testimony. And she started piecing together the story. And it reminded me that there's so many ways to gather information, that you don't have to be confrontational and aggressive, that it's in a lot of places. And it does give you a little power to have a notebook. In school, I was never even the kid who asked questions, and questions became my life.
And again, just based on what you're saying there, it harkens back to something that we talked about earlier about relationship building. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting when you cite that having the notebook, or I guess even a tape recorder, it really does give you a certain kind of power. But again, I would think that just being able to relate to somebody, regardless of what the topic is that you're approaching them about, I would think would be an avenue. Like when I knowing you, I would think that would be something that you could really use to your advantage.
Oh yeah, and the notebook thing it's a really interesting question. I think the technology you use. I don't tape actually because I learned shorthand. And I don't I still think tapes make people a little bit nervous. There's something that feels so verbatim and so mechanical about it. Besides that, I know too many reporters who have had it malfunction or had it taken from them by the person they were interviewing. Mm-hmm. And they listened to all the other sources on the tape recording in an investigative piece. It was a nightmare. So I'm leery of them. But I feel like with a notebook, there are times you want to kind of set it aside and just talk. But there are times when it is actually a relief to somebody who's talking about something really painful. If you are looking down, if you are not doing this, if you're not making all that eye contact they tell us to make, people kind of want to get your attention back and the pressure's off. And besides, it's incredibly flattering when somebody's writing down what you're saying. And so it creates a different dynamic. I have not had it be a problem in that sense at all. But there's also that great trick at the end of the interview where you close your notebook very ostentatiously and say that was great. And then you chat a little more and they say something absolutely wonderful, because you never want to have your pen put away. You can flip your notebook back really fast, but you never want to lose the ability to capture that last little moment. That's something else you can't do with a tape recorder. But yeah, people always relax. It's just like photographers will snap a shot once they say we're done, because once people relax and feel like the ordeal is over, they say the best stuff.
You were inducted into the St. Louis Media Hall of Fame in March of this year, 2020. So congratulations. Of the 14 inductees, you're one of 2 women. So can you talk about being a woman and working in your industry? I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes over the years.
Oh yeah, quite a lot of changes. What I remember so vividly, like in those days at the RFT, is how tense and confrontational and aggressive the meetings were even. We would have an editorial meeting once a week. And even though my editor was lovely, he was gentle, still good friends, there were a lot of really brash guys. And then there was me, for a while there. And they would be, can I cuss? Is it okay to cuss on this?
Oh yeah, okay. Absolutely.
Because I had a colleague who would every week, he was supposed to be doing this long investigative piece on MSD. And every week the editor would say, how's that coming? And he would say, those motherfuckers are stonewalling me, man. It was just like, it summed it up. There was all this posturing and I was scared to voice the story idea because there was so much machismo. And I remember going to a conference for IRE, which is investigative reporters and editors. And it was the same way. You would have thought these guys should be wearing trench coats and slouch hats and carrying a flask and smoking. It was like nothing had changed since 1930. Right. But then you get literary journalism, creative nonfiction, things soften up, things widen out, and the world is different. You've got people like Susan Orlean and, real superstars in this that are not macho and not posturing. And I think there's been just a huge shift. It feels much more comfortable now.
That is good to know. I've had a lot of female students that have been interested in journalism, particularly recently. And I have to say, I'm happy to see journalism making quite a comeback, because for a while there, not too long ago, there was some fear that it was a dying field. I don't think anymore. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about a particular award or a piece of work that you're particularly proud of? Putting you on the spot a little bit.
Awards are a weird thing because it's very exciting and it looks great on your CV or your resume, but it's like 5 minutes of exciting and then it's gone. And you're feeling like you should still think it's great, but you don't. It just goes flat. And if anything, it kind of ups the pressure. You feel like, oh, gee, now I have to write something new and it has to be really good because somebody thought I was good. So as a rule, I'm not in love with them. There was one that I thought was really great because it was the James Beard Award. And I can't cook to save my life. I mean, my husband's polite about it, but really, I'm not a cook. And so I had written this long piece about an organic farmer and, with lots of food imagery. And so when that one won a James Beard Award and I got the bronze round thing on the ribbon that looked like it was a chef award, that one was just a thrill. Totally undeserved and unmerited. And I just love that I got a James Beard Award because our amazing dining critic actually flew to New York. He was nominated too, and he had to bring mine back and he didn't get one. And so,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, we laughed a lot about that. He was like, seriously, you can't even cook,
Oh, that is good. I like that. So I guess for me as well. All right, so students in today's very now uncertain economy are understandably concerned about the job market following graduation. Things like transferable skills and the validity of a humanities degree, are being called into question in favor of more degree-to-job programs like in the health industry and in engineering. You hold humanities degrees from St. Louis U, including a BA in philosophy and communications and a Ph.D. in American studies. So how have you leveraged those skills and credentials in your career as a writer, as an editor, as a novelist, as an instructor?
I don't think I could have done any of that without them. And I'm not saying that just to plug humanities, although I would do that till I died. But philosophy taught me not answers, but questions. It taught me how to ask questions. Mm-hmm. And that's what I do. It certainly wasn't anything that was going to get me a salary. I mean, it was not smart job prep, but it was amazing. And I still think that way. It was just a huge discipline and training of the mind. And then American studies, I think what that did was you're exploring all different disciplines and how they come together on a single topic. So you're chopping things up in a new way. And in order to do that, you have to be able to move in and out of the vocabulary, the jargon of each of those disciplines. And you see that they each have their own worldview, their own rituals, their own epistemology, their own ways of thinking, their own sense of what truth is. And so being able to move in and out of that, if you're going to now go interview all sorts of people in all walks of life, all sorts of professionals, it helps a great deal just to even know that they have their own language and to be able to begin to get some passing sense of it. It just, I think, makes you more fluid and they don't feel like they're talking to an idiot. So it was wonderful for that. And then honestly, just having a PhD, when we joked about it, it's like it's never gotten me a table. It was something I did because I hated being in the corporate world and I just wanted to go back and do something I loved. But when I'm interviewing somebody who's really at the top of their field, let's say a neuroscientist or something, and they're sick of stupid reporters, they're sick of people coming in who don't know what they're doing. And I say, oh, about your latest publication. And they say, oh, well, you wouldn't understand that. I can give you something from the popular press. And that gets my ire up. And by God, I drop the initials. I will say, well, when I got my doctorate, only not to be obnoxious, but because they need to know that not every journalist is a complete fluffy airhead. And then pretty soon, it's amazing. They start to pay attention. They start to really answer the question in depth and not dumb it down.
And why am I should be getting some trouble for this. Why am I not calling you Dr. Batz Cooperman?
Yeah, because that would be silly and nobody does. No, I'm not an academic. That is not at all who I am. I trot it out only when somebody is being evasive or, acting like I'm an idiot.
Okay, so that said, what advice would you have for students who are interested in writing or editing as a career? Write and read the best stuff you can find. None of this is new. That's why I love this field. There's no rocket science, there's no secret code, and it's really not about schmoozing. It helps to keep friendships up, it helps to find freelance work, it helps to know people, certainly, but the main thing is that they know your work and they know that you work hard and that you care. You don't have to be all persona and presentation and doing PowerPoints and trying to drum up numbers to prove that you did work last week. You just hand them your article. So there's not a lot of bullshit. So my advice is do as much writing as you can. Find something that you really care about and do it for free. Offer to some organization that you will help work on their newsletter, that you will go profile somebody for them. That can really help. A lot of people don't think they should do things for free, but if an organization is strapped and you believe in it and you can do beautiful work that you can then have in your portfolio and show other people, you're ahead of the game. And then my only other piece would sound like I'm contradicting myself, but don't just write about what you're interested in. Write about stuff you're absolutely not interested in.
I remember early on my editor saying, "Oh, do you like science?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Would you like to write about bovine growth hormone, this new thing Monsanto's doing?" I said, if you need me to." The challenge of that was one of my favorite things I've ever done. I did a whole bunch of stuff before anybody even cared about genetic modified anything. I did 3 different stories on that because it was a challenge and it was good for me. And it turned out to be fun. I never would have chosen it.
Sure. Well, it makes me think of many universities, including at St. Louis U, like in our English 1500 program, we require students to write a dysoi logoi, which is taking their argument and making sure that they write from both perspectives of whatever argument that they're taking. And it's really important to be able to do something so you have a completely different perspective. I know that's not exactly what you're talking about, but more on the lines of being able to push your boundaries, because otherwise you're never going to know what you're capable of doing, particularly if you're working as a journalist or interested in journalism.
Oh, that'd be the most important thing for journalism, because if you're talking to somebody who's on the opposite side of a political issue, you've got to be able to get inside their skin. If you're interviewing a rapist or a pedophile or a murderer, for that period of that interview, you suspend judgment. It's a weird, creepy thing. It takes a lot of mental energy, but you have got to be inside that person's head, not your own. And so being able to be agile in that way, that's huge training.
So one of the things that, and I think this is true of writers at any age, I think we all have that editor, that inner editor looking over our shoulder and telling us all the things that we're doing wrong or the things that fill us with self-doubt. What do you do? I don't know if you have that same issue, but what do you do to try to silence it?
Oh, I just write anyway. Yeah, I have it all the time. With journalism, it was always that I didn't have the right information, and what I was writing would turn out to be completely wrong because there was some basic thing I had missed and I hadn't found, or I would look really naive, and then, or it would be biased, or there are a million things. And now it's that it's insipid or self-indulgent or shallow or dumb. So there's all sorts of those voices all the time.
Sure.
It's, if somebody sends me a nice email, I might save it and reread it. That can help. And mainly I just, pet the dog because he doesn't care. And, look to other parts of my life that are stable, where even if I really screw up, it's okay. There's still people who will love me.
I wonder if more of that self-doubt, which you referred to, like I presume you're talking about when you're working with the common reader, is because you're inserting yourself into these stories.
Yeah, it's a whole different kind of self-doubt.
Yeah.
Before it was, I didn't gather my material right. And now it's, I'm not smart enough. I'm not deep enough. I'm too obsessed with myself and it's cutesy and silly and who cares? It's not going to help anybody else. The biggest thing for any of this, though, I have found, is to get over yourself and to just keep focusing on the story. It's got to be about that story and the reader and not about you. You just pretend there's no byline and it's just what matters with this topic. What I found out that people might need to know, what is interesting, what is urgent, what feels charged with meaning, and it doesn't matter what they think of me. If you just focus on the story, you can kind of get over yourself a little bit. But I don't think the fear ever goes away. I think it's a form of stage fright, and I don't think it's altogether bad. It keeps the adrenaline up.
Sure. So related, and again, I think this is something that I hear from writers of all ages about writer's block. And I know it's been a question that students of mine, knowing that we've got this series going, have wanted me to ask writers, how do you get over writer's block if you ever have it?
I have never had it. And I think I know why. I've always had slightly too much to do. And so I realized early on, again, being shy, there were days that I just could not bring myself to pick up the phone and make those tough phone calls. So those would be the days I did all the research. And then there would be a day I felt really outgoing and charged up, and I had extra coffee, and I would do all my gathering of tough information. And so I'd learn to match the mood at the moment to the task and not be so linear. Like I had a colleague who had to do everything on one story before he would move to the next story. It's like, you're not going to get anything done that way. So I multitask a lot. You know, in other words, I have several projects up in the air at once, always, but that allows me to do what I'm in the mood to do at the moment. Mm-hmm. So if I'm anxious and I'm feeling like my writing's crap, I can revise and red pencil everything. Or I can go dig and research, and there's no ego pressure at all. So there's always something I can do that doesn't feel scary.
Okay, there you have it. Good answer. I like it. So I don't know if where you're speaking from right now is your writing space, but yeah. I'm always fascinated by the space of writers and artists and educators. What do you have in your space that makes it feel specifically yours and makes you feel comfortable?
Okay, let's see. It's kind of a garret. It's got a pointy ceiling. It's up on the upper story of our old kind of farmhouse house. Uh-huh. I got lots of books scattered around, nice cozy space heater, music, dog bed down here, toys everywhere, old reclaimed wood on the hardwood floor. We had to have it put in, so we got old wood, not new wood. That makes me feel better. Lamplight. I cannot stand fluorescent light. I would rather have virtually no light than anything cold and green or yellow, greenish. You know, I can't stand fluorescent light. So lots of lamps. That's it. Just books. Comfortable recliner over there so I can read and revise. A telephone. Sorry about that.
All right. So I'm going to flip these out of order because you just mentioned that you've got books scattered around. I know you're not. It's not technically your nightstand. So, but I am going to ask you the nightstand question. What are you reading right now?
For my book club, I am reading a book I've already read, but I was so happy that Patty picked it because I wanted to reread it. It's Colin McCann, Let the Great World Spin. And I think it's one of the most beautiful books ever. So I'm rereading that, but I also had to have something that was a little more, I don't know, new and engaging. And I just discovered James Salas. Have you ever read him?
I have not.
Sallis. He's amazing, and nobody knows about him. He is, he wrote noir, but it is loaded with literature, loaded with these really smart, elegant references to books. And he's got this great character who's it's a noir detective, but he's brilliant. And I can't even explain, it's so well written. So that's kind of this little jewel that I don't know why he never got more play, but he's amazing. So that's James Salas. And then the other one that I just finished is by Sigrid Nunez because I just love her. I love everything she's ever written. Okay,
lovely. How about your music playlist? What do you either what are you listening to or what do you like to listen to when you're working? You may have mentioned Bach earlier.
Yeah, this is so nerdy. I don't have any new music for working. I mean, I like Bach because it stills my mind. I will listen to Gregorian chant because it soothes me. If I'm really, what'd you say?
I said absolutely not. I said it's not new music at all.
No, it's not new music. It's the antithesis. And I will listen to blues music if I just feel the need to kind of get connected. You know, sometimes writing can feel a little bit abstract and cerebral, and blues is kind of gutsy. It brings me back to earth. So for blues, I love Marquise Knox, R&B, Solomon Burke, and jazz just for the pure delight of it, like Bill Evans, piano jazz, Miles Davis, any of that. And then Laurie Anderson, I just love. So Strange Angels, I still find haunting into that. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got, we're closing in on Thanksgiving right now. And as a final question, I'm going to put a scenario out there for you. So you're going to have to think fast on your feet, even though you're sitting. All right. So this is a pandemic Thanksgiving. And if you're like me at all, you're not looking forward to it.
No.
One iota. But in this particular one, we're going to say that as a kid, you somehow picked you grabbed the long end of the wishbone And this is the year that you get to pick your 5 historical figures that are at this year's Thanksgiving table with you and your historian husband.
Okay.
Who's there?
All right.
And these are historical figures.
Yeah, so they can be dead, but we're resurrecting them just for turkey.
They're around just for dinner, and that's it. Then they got to go back.
All right. Okay. For Andrew, my husband, I would have to have John Quincy Adams because he loves his Renaissance brain. He would be a conversationalist. Maybe not charming, but brilliant. And he could speak in many languages, and he could talk about plants and literature and world. And so we'd have him. For me, Toni Morrison, because I love her mind and her heart. I think there's great heart in everything she writes, and she scares me a little, but if I were the hostess serving her turkey, I think she could laugh. I think we'd have fun. I would have William James because I love his thought. I mean, philosophy, psychology, all of it, stream of consciousness. I just think William James is fascinating. I would like him to come back. I would actually like him to stay after dinner and just have a drink with me and really talk seriously.
I think technically if dinner's not over with, the drink still counts. Okay.
Okay. But I mean, I want him one-on-one. And then Frederick Douglass, I think he could hold the party down, and Andrew would love to talk to Frederick Douglass. So we would have him. He could talk about anything, and the man was just so brilliant. And what have I got? I've got 4 there.
Yeah, one more.
Nellie Bly. It has to be Nellie Bly. She's my heroine. Yeah. Do you know her?
I do know Nellie Bly.
Yeah. So she would have to be there. She could talk about the asylum and about going around the world.
Yeah.
She was a female reporter when it was really hard to be a female reporter. So Nellie would have to be there.
I don't know if Nellie Bly is still taught in journalism school, but she was certainly taught in journalism school when I was there.
You're lucky. She was not in mine. I found out about her later. Yeah.
That's interesting because you and I were not far apart. So I definitely, that's right. That's
I should check with Davis. Maybe I missed it, but I don't remember. I thought I found out about her later. I was utterly delighted.
That is an amazing list. Way to go. It's not
I don't know how they'd all get along, but.
Right. Well, it is Thanksgiving. Maybe they'd be on their best behavior. Or conversely, because it's Thanksgiving, they wouldn't.
Exactly.
Family. I don't know.
Exactly. And it depends on how liquored up they got. So could get interesting.
Well, Jeannette, I would like to sincerely thank you for sitting down with me today. You and I have been talking about this for months, and I'm so glad that we finally got to do it, despite the fact that if our viewers could look out here, it is one of the dreariest rainy days of the year so far. But this has brightened my day for sure. You are such a great person to speak with, and I've been a fan of your work for years. And so I love the fact that people now have a chance to get a little bit more attuned to what you're doing and who you are.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and you made it easy. Thank you.